Give me land, lots of land, and the starry skies above. Don't fence me in. Let me ride through the wide open country that I love. Don't fence me in. The song is by Cole Porter, of course, dating back to 1934. But the words could be sung by Australia's native animals right now. They are, of necessity, being increasingly fenced in. It's a happy story, in a way, about protecting them, allowing them to flourish, ensuring that they don't face extinction. But there's undoubtedly also a tinge of sadness here, that they can only live and survive behind these fences. Around the country, dozens of enclosures are being built to keep our native animals safe. Some in the outback, others on the outskirts of our big cities. Last week, indeed, the Australian Wildlife Conservancy completed a new cat-proof fence in their Newhaven Sanctuary. It is the largest fence of this kind in the world. So, is fencing the only way forward? And are we doing enough to protect all the various species under threat? Well, Atticus Fleming is CEO of the Australian Wildlife Conservancy and joins us on the line. Atticus, good afternoon.
Hi, Richard. How you doing?
Yeah, good. Now, first up, can you tell us about this Newhaven fence? The scale of it is just really kind of hard to get your mind around.
I will tell you about the scale of it. Let me start there by saying you're right. There is a tinge of sadness about this story, but the sadness relates to the record of extinctions in Australia, the worst mammal extinction rate in the world, and many more animals now on the brink of extinction. So we have to do something about that, and the big conservation fence at Newhaven is part of a grand plan to stop the extinction wave in Australia. So the fence at Newhaven is stage one. We've just finished. It's 44 kilometres long, and it encloses 10,000 hectares. So that is a massive area, 100 square kilometres, a spectacular array of habitats, big mountain range, spinifex sand plains, a beautiful part of the country, but like so much of Australia, it's largely a marsupial ghost town until we get this fence built, remove the cats, and put the animals back that have been there for thousands of years until cats and foxes came.
I mean, it is such a bittersweet story, isn't it? Because it contains both elements. It's both this glorious arc that you're building, but also, you'd have to say, an admission of defeat of all of us, that we haven't managed to provide an Australia where they can survive.
Look, it is recognising the fact that by bringing cats and foxes in particular into the country, we introduced a catastrophic wave of extinction.
Was that intentional, Atticus?
Oh, look,
was that catastrophic until
it was? Well, it was intentional in the sense that people liked the idea of having cats and foxes and released them deliberately. I don't.
Sorry, I meant your word usage, Atticus.
My word usage. Yes, unfortunately, not intentional, but look.
But nonetheless, well chosen. Yeah.
That's right. And so, look, your point, is it sad? Yes, it's sad that we've got this horrendous extinction rate. But the positive here is that there is a solution. And it is actually a really exciting solution, because these large areas that Australian Wildlife Conservancy is creating, such as at Newhaven, when you go into these areas, it is like stepping back in time to before the cats were here. Because with the animals back, what you will see is the bush come alive again, with all of the small mammals, the bettongs, the bilbies, the central rock rats, the numbats, all of these animals that the early explorers saw in abundance. And yet, as I said, they've now disappeared from most of the country. So we are turning back time by creating these large conservation fences. We are re-establishing parts of the Australian landscape to a more natural setting, to the setting that was there a couple of hundred years ago. That's not sad. That's really positive, and that's really exciting.
And I presume the flora follows the fauna, does it? Once you bring back the animals, you then change the whole ecosystem.
Yeah, absolutely, because a lot of these little mammals that are now missing but we can put back were really ecosystem engineers. So a little bettong that might weigh a little over a kilo would shift several tons of soil every year. And when you have imagine across Australia 200 years ago there were hundreds and hundreds of millions of these little mammals, all shifting a few tons of soil. The whole landscape was different. So really by getting rid of the foxes and the cats and the rabbits and the camels and replacing them with what should be there, these little mammals, you're basically restoring the landscape, the health of the landscape, including the plants, the flora.
Yeah, Atticus Fleming is here from the Australian Wildlife Conservancy. We're talking about the general philosophy of fence building, but also this particular fence, the largest in the world that they've just completed. Of course, after the mammoth job of building these 45-kilometre line of fencing, you've then got to, as you say, clear out the area of all these introduced species, the predators. Here you've got the assistance of local Warlpiri rangers. Tell us about how they operate.
Well, the local Warlpiri rangers who work for Australian Wildlife Conservancy have this amazing skill. I mean, they're the best cat trackers and hunters in the world. And so, I mean, I've been fortunate to be in the field with Christine and Alice and Benedict and the other rangers who work out there and watch them follow tracks through the bush. And it's extraordinary because to my eyes, it's almost impossible to see these tracks, and yet the rangers can see them. They can tell if it's a male or a female, whether she's pregnant or has kittens, and they follow these tracks until they locate the cat, obviously, and by utilising those skills combined with some conventional measures, we hope to have this 10,000 hectare area free of cats by the end of this year. So, that's quite extraordinary, and we wouldn't be able to achieve it, certainly in that time frame, without the exceptional knowledge and skills of the traditional owners. Okay,
these cats, well, I assume you euthanize them at that point, but how big are they? What do they look like?
Look, they do look a little different to your domestic tabby, but only in the sense that the domestic cat is lying around at home being fed lots of probably high-fat food, so they're a bit overweight and sloppy. These cats in the wild are lean, and so they're not much bigger generally, although you do get some very big ones, but they're fit, lean, and they are very, very good at killing Australia's wildlife.
Okay, indeed. In 24 hours in their life, they'd get rid of a bit, wouldn't they?
Look, there is published work which talks about how many birds, reptiles, and soon-to-come mammals, published work, which shows feral cats across Australia are killing 2,000 native animals every minute. So
it is worth pausing after that, isn't it? 2,000 a minute.
That's right. It's extraordinary. And most Australians just don't appreciate the scale of this problem and the impact that cats are having. And that is why so much of Australia is empty of the native wildlife that should be there.
Including the bird life.
Including the bird life. The reptiles, the birds often go unnoticed. The mammals have been the hardest hit, but the birds and the reptiles are also suffering, and we're going to see extinctions with the birds and the reptiles. The effect is a little delayed with them.
Now, I know you're saying that the fenced areas, they're the only way. We have tried to remove the cats from the whole population, from outside the fenced areas. We've tried to reduce the threat. There's been many efforts. It never seems to work, though, does it?
Look, again, part of the sad story, if you like, is that we haven't yet found a way to remove cats from right across the landscape. There are many things that a lot of people are working on this. There's some fantastic work being done, but we haven't cracked, we haven't found the silver bullet, if you like. So what do? We keep trying. And there is one technology on the horizon that may provide, if not a silver bullet, certainly a much more effective control mechanism, and that's something called gene drive technology. Effectively, it might mean we can sterilise the cat population. Various mechanisms for doing that, but that is a very long-term proposition. There's a lot of work to be done, and that's something that would take decades if we were to be able to do it.
And of course, the cats they might be the biggest problem, but there are foxes, and there are the pigs, and there are the camels, etc.
Yeah, that's right. And actually, you've got to address them all in an integrated way. And this gene drive technology actually could be applied to some of the other species as well. But the other thing we can do is, if you like, supersize these feral-free areas. And so at Newhaven, this 44 kilometres is just stage one. That's 10,000 hectares. Stage two, we're hoping to go to 100,000 hectares. And, that's just taking things to a whole another level.
How long will it take for those? I love the description of the Warlpiri Rangers and what they do. How long will it take them to free this area of the ferals, and then what happens?
We hope and expect to have all of the cats removed from this 10,000 hectares by the end of 2018. We've already
At the end of this year.
End of this year. So 30 cats have come out already. We reckon there's another 20 or 30. So you've got 50 or 60 cats. And you can actually do the maths. That means they're killing probably 70,000 native animals a year just in this 10,000 hectares. So for the animals that are some of the small mammals that are hanging on to survival in this area, that's going to be a big boost straight away. Okay, we get them out by the end of 2018. Then we start the process of reintroductions. So that's when things like animals like the marla, which is a beautiful little wallaby, which is effectively extinct on mainland Australia, that's when the marla comes back. When the bettongs come back. There's an animal called a burrowing bettong. It's the only kangaroo species that builds underground warrens like a rabbit and lives communally in these underground warrens. Out at Newhaven, those warrens are still there that were built by the bettongs 100 years ago, 50 years ago. The bettongs have long since disappeared. We're going to bring them back. So this process of bringing animals back, many of these animals culturally very important to the Warlpiri Laricha traditional owners. It's great for the environment, it's great for the country, it's great for the traditional owners, and it's just a very powerful statement about how we can turn things around in Australia.
And even if Atticus Fleming is here from the Australian Wildlife Conservancy, even if you're right about the idea that there's some technology in the future, and we do manage to knock out that full population in 10, 20, 30 years' time, we want to have some animals left to reintroduce. There
are 6 or 8 species that even now are extinct outside of feral cat-free areas. So that's 30 mammals are extinct in Australia completely. There's another 6 or 8 that would be gone except for these feral cat-free areas. So
okay, yes, so they exist but only behind the fences?
Only behind the fences or on offshore islands where there are no cats and foxes. So yes, these areas will save species from extinction. And look, the other thing is it's a big bet that, there is a chance that we will never find a solution to cats, at least not a solution that's good enough to save all of the animals. So there are some species that are so vulnerable to cats that, the future is very, very bleak other than in these large feral-free areas. And
will there be a point where, the other thing that I guess worries me from a selfish point of view about the fenced areas is the idea that I won't be able to see any of these animals. Will people at some point be allowed to go into these fenced areas, if not your one, then others?
Oh, absolutely. And certainly at Newhaven, the property we've been talking about, there's a campground. People come and camp there already. So once these animals are established out there, there'll be nocturnal tours. This will be your chance to see the Australian bush as it was a couple of hundred years ago and as it should be again. So not only will you be able to see it, but it'll be an experience that'll blow you away.
You'll see it, and I bet you'll hear it too. I can imagine being in a campground with the proper numbers of Australian wildlife around you. The air would be sweet with noise.
It'll be extraordinary. It really is, and that is the Australia. And if we lose those animals forever, we've lost such an important part about what makes us Australians. It's in our DNA, our country's DNA. So we've got to keep hold of it.
All right, very good to talk to you. Congratulations on completing the fence. It's a world-beating thing, the world's biggest fence of this kind. Thank you very much for talking to me.
Thanks, Richard, and thanks to all the listeners who are supporters.
There's Atticus Fleming. If you want to know more about the work of the Australian Wildlife Conservancy, there's a bit more detail on their website too about the Newhaven Sanctuary and some amazing photographs of this fence, and kind of the scale of it really becomes apparent. You'll find them online, the Australian Wildlife Conservancy. You're listening to ABC Radio Sydney.